The recent Kingdom chapters have made the Bayou parallel impossible to miss. Shin is trapped, Roboku is now behind him, and Kantan's walls are in front of him. Even the OGs of the Heishin unit immediately clocked that this type of battlefield was all too similar to where Ouki fell. But I do not think Hara is only asking us to remember Ouki's death at Bayou. I think he is asking us a much bigger question. Has Shin finally grown enough to survive the kind of battlefield that Ouki could not? Because Bayou showed us what happens when Roboku fully controls the shape of the battlefield, that even a great general of the heavens can fall if Roboku turns the war itself into a cage. And right now, Shin is being placed inside that same kind of cage. So what if I told you that Bayou is the hook, but Gian is actually the key? Bayou shows us the problem, while Gian gives us the answer. At Gian, Shin already proved that he could break through one of Roboku's carefully crafted traps through instinct, unity, and execution. So this current battle is not just Bayou repeating itself, it is Bayou's problem meeting Gian's solution. And that is why Shin might actually surpass Ouki right now, not by becoming Ouki 2.0, but by combining Ouki's ideal, Jukyo's instinct, and the Heishin unit's unmatched unity to create a breakthrough only Shin could come up with. So to understand why this moment matters so much for Shin, we first have to go back to Bayou. Roboku's real goal at Bayou was never simply to invade Chin, and it was not even to destroy the Ouki army. The real goal was always to eliminate Ouki himself. That is what made Bayou so terrifying, because from the outside it looked like a normal war between Chin and Zhao. Army against army, commander against commander, and Chin fighting hard to defend its territory. But underneath all of that, Roboku designed the entire battlefield around one outcome: the death of Ouki. And that matters because Kingdom's recent chapters are now doing something very similar with Shin. Roboku is not only trying to destroy the Heishin unit, he is not only trying to stop Chin from taking Kantan, he is shaping the battlefield around removing Shin as the decisive threat. And this actually connects directly back to Hango. During the Hango campaign, Roboku recognized Shin as the most troublesome enemy, but he also made it clear that Shin would only be worth targeting with his full strength if Shin stood as commander-in-chief. That is what makes this current battle so important. Shin might not be the supreme commander of the entire Chin army, but on his front, he is effectively acting as commander-in-chief of 110,000 men. He's the one leading the attack on Zhao's capital. He is the one who breached Zhao's inner lands, and because of that, Roboku is now treating Shin as the person whose death would change the meaning of the entire battle, just like Ouki at Bayou. The tragedy was not simply Ouki dying, it was that his death became the real intended result of the battle. On paper, Shin succeeded in defending against Zhao's invasion, but narratively and emotionally, Bayou did not feel like a Chin victory because Ouki died. That single death changed the meaning entirely. Shin may have survived the invasion, but Roboku still achieved the outcome he desired most. He turned the surface level result of the war into something deeper. He made Ouki's death the real legacy of the battle. And that is the danger Shin is facing right now. For Shin to surpass Ouki, he cannot just survive this trap, because if Roboku once again defines the meaning of this battle, that means Shin let this moment turn into another Bayou. He has to do more than escape. Shin has to be the one to change the meaning of the battle. That is why Kingdom's recent chapters are so important. Roboku waits until Shin begins sieging Kantan. He waits until Shin's focus is on the capital, until his army is fully committed, and until the Heishin unit is at its most vulnerable. And then he reveals his trap. Once again, using his superior knowledge of Zhao terrain, Roboku pinces Shin against Kantan's walls, and all of a sudden, the battlefield is no longer putting pressure on Zhao. It has become a cage for Chin. This is where the Bayou parallel becomes more than a visual callback. Hara is not only making us remember Ouki because the scene looks familiar, he is placing Shin in the same type of strategic situation. Roboku lets the enemy push forward until they are fully committed and then shuts them in. That is Roboku's specialty. He does not only defeat people with numbers, he defeats them by controlling where they can move, what they can see, and by the time they realize it, the shape of the battlefield has already closed around them. That is why this battle matters, because Bayou proved that even a great general of the heavens can fall when Roboku fully controls the shape of the battlefield. And now Shin is being asked to face that same kind of battlefield, that same type of wall. If Shin is going to surpass Ouki, this is the wall he must overcome. Bayou shows the problem. Roboku does not only defeat people by overpowering them, he defeats them by designing battlefields where defeat feels almost inevitable. But that is why Gian matters so much. It shows us the first time Shin proved he could break through one of Roboku's cages. And the most important thing about Gian is that Shin's breakthrough did not happen because he suddenly became smarter than Roboku. It happened because Shin responded to the battlefield in a way Roboku could not fully control. And it all starts with Shin's instinctual move at the beginning of Roboku's encirclement. When Shin is about to get swallowed up by Roboku's trap, Shin realizes that staying in position is exactly what Roboku wants. If the Hishin unit simply remains where they are supposed to be, the Chin army is only going to be crushed inside the flow Roboku has already prepared. So Shin makes a move that should not make any sense from a normal strategic point of view. He completely abandons the right wing. Roboku himself even recognizes it as a move similar to Hyou. That is important because this was not just Shin randomly running away from danger. This was Shin sensing that the battlefield itself had become unfavorable. Roboku's cage works by forcing the enemy to remain inside the battlefield he has created, but Shin's instinct allowed him to move outside of that design before it fully swallowed them. And that maneuver is what eventually allows the Hishin unit to link up with the Gakuka army and use the drill formation. That is the first part of Shin's breakthrough, instinct. As I said before, Shin does not necessarily outsmart Roboku in the traditional sense, but when a battlefield is collapsing, he can still find the one path that gives them life even when defeat feels inevitable. Gian also proves that Shin's answer to Roboku is not just charging forward by himself. The second part of his breakthrough is unity. After Kyokai breaks through the Seika army, Shin stops trying to force his own path forward and chooses to trust her instead. And that is where Shin and his Hishin unit become so dangerous, because even when Shin and Kyokai are separated, they are still moving within the same flow. Similar to Ouki and To, there is an insane level of unspoken trust between them that allows them to act separately while still moving toward the same vision. Shin understands that to break through a thick wall, it is better to burrow under it. And in that moment, he trusts Kyokai to complete the path forward that he started. That matters because Roboku's battlefield is built on isolation. He is always trying to divide armies, isolate commanders, and force people into situations where they can no longer help each other. But the Hishin unit is different. Even when they are physically separated, they can still act as one. They are one of the most cohesive armies in the story, if not the most cohesive. And it is that cohesion which allows them to resist Roboku's design. That is why Gian connects directly to the current battle. In the recent chapters, Kyokai is once again outside the trap while Shin is inside it. And if Gian showed us anything, it is that separating Shin and Kyokai does not mean the enemy has fully cut off Shin's answer. The Hishin unit can be split. It can be thrown into chaos. In other words, it can be forced into a battlefield that Roboku designed and still move as one unit. And that brings us to the final part of Shin's breakthrough, execution. In Gian, the Hishin unit and the Gakuka army actually escape Roboku's encirclement. It is the clearest proof that Shin has already broken through one of Roboku's cages before. The important thing is not only that Shin survived, it is that Roboku created a battlefield designed to trap Shin inside with no hope of victory, and Shin still found a path out. That is why Gian is the real overlooked answer to Kingdom's recent chapters. Bayou shows us the kind of battlefield that defeated Ouki, but Gian gives us the first glimpse of Shin learning how to break through that same kind of battlefield in his own way. It starts with instinct, then unity, then execution. And that is why this current battle is not just Bayou repeating itself, it is Bayou's problem meeting Gian's solution. Now, this is where the idea of Shin surpassing Ouki becomes really important. If Shin does break through this battlefield, it will not be because he became Ouki. It will be because Shin has grown to be the kind of general only he could become. Shin will surpass Ouki not by copying his style, but by turning his own instincts and allies into a different answer to Roboku's battlefield. And that difference begins with Hyou. During the coalition invasion, Hyou throws his shield to Shin and tells him to keep moving forward before ultimately losing his life to Hoken. That moment matters because Shin's path is not only shaped by Ouki's glaive, it is also shaped by Jukyo's shield. Ouki represents Shin's ideal image of a great general of the heavens. He is the legacy Shin has been chasing ever since Bayou, but Jukyo represents something different. He represents the instinctual style that allows Shin to disrupt Roboku's plans. This is important because Jukyo was the first general to genuinely break through Roboku's design. He could not defeat Hoken, but he still proved that Roboku's battlefields were not impossible to break through. They can be challenged through instinct, and that fact comes full circle at Gian. When Shin makes his Jukyo-esque move against Roboku's encirclement, he remembers the importance of not letting their fire die out, even while they are trapped inside an overwhelming battlefield. So Shin is not trying to become another Ouki. He's becoming a general formed by multiple inherited wills. Ouki's ideal, Jukyo's instinct, and the dreams of everyone in the Heishin units, both dead and alive. That is why Shin's answer to Roboku is different. He breaks through Roboku's battlefield using the instinct Jukyo passed down to him, the same instinct he has witnessed time and time again. But Shin's breakthrough is not only individual, and that is what the recent chapters make so clear. Even after Roboku's trap comes into full effect, the focus is not only on Shin finding an answer by himself, but also on the Heishin unit responding around him and buying the time he needs. When Roboku's trap finishes its pincer setup, Kyokai, out of pure instinct, rushes in from the outside, while Ten immediately reforms the ranks to protect Shin. These small details are important because Ouki's greatness was tied to his overwhelming presence and leadership, but Shin's greatness is closely tied to the way the Heishin unit naturally moves around him. Kyokai, Ten, and the Heishin unit's instinctual response to Shin being in danger show that Shin's instinctual nature is contagious. It does not only make him move, it moves the people around him. Roboku might be isolating Shin physically, but the bond and chemistry Shin has nurtured from day one make that isolation incomplete. Because Shin does not break through alone, he breaks through with an army that has learned to move with him as if it is second nature. And that brings everything back to Ouki. When Ouki passed down his glaive to Shin at Bayou, he passed down his will, but he also told Shin something very important, that he could not teach him how to be a great general of the heavens. It is something that had to be learned by running through the worst battlefields with his men. And that proves that Shin inheriting Ouki's will was never meant to turn him into an Ouki clone. The path itself had to be created through experience, through struggle, through every battlefield Shin has survived with the Heishin unit. That is exactly what Gian represents, and it is exactly what his current battle against Roboku represents once again. Shin's breakthrough at Gian was the result of what Ouki told him to learn by suffering with his unit across countless battlefields until he could create his own answer. So this is how Shin surpasses Ouki. He does not become Ouki 2.0. Shin takes Ouki's ideal, Jukyo's instinct, and the Heishin unit's unity, and then turns them into a breakthrough that only he could create. All in all, the Bayou parallel is not just there to make us remember Ouki's death. It is there to show us the kind of battlefield Shin now has to overcome. Bayou proved that when Roboku fully controls the shape of the battlefield, even someone as great as Ouki can fall. But Gian proves something just as important. Shin has already broken through one of Roboku's cages before, not by outsmarting him in the traditional sense, but through that instinct, through that unity, and through that execution. He turned a battlefield designed for defeat into a path forward. That is why this moment matters so much. If Shin breaks through here, he will not be surpassing Ouki by replacing him. Shin will be surpassing him by taking Ouki's ideal, Jukyo's instinct, and the Heishin unit's unity, and turning them into an answer only he could create. This is not just about escaping another trap. It is about Shin refusing to let Roboku define the meaning of the battlefield, the same way he did at Bayou. And if Shin can do that, then he proves he is well on his way to becoming a great general of the heavens in his own right. If you made it to the end, thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you think Shin will do in the next chapter in the comment section below. Also, it would mean a lot to me if you left a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe for more Kingdom videos like this.